Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 13, the Cash-Landrum UFO Incident.
Quite a famous one, this.
It really is. Back in December 1980, three witnesses down in rural Texas came across this blinding diamond-shaped UFO.
And the heat apparently was just incredible. Scorched their car, even blistered their skin.
Yeah, exactly. So the big question remains, was it some kind of secret experiment or maybe something not of this earth?
That's what we're diving into.
Right. We're going to examine all the details we can find about this alleged encounter, look at the really quite serious health problems the witnesses reported afterwards.
And also sift through the investigations, the skepticism.
Yeah.
Basically try to piece together what happened based on the reports and analyses out there.
Okay, so let's set the scene. It's the evening of December 29th, 1980. Around 9 p.m.
Yeah, and the witnesses are Betty Cash, who was 51 at the time, Vickie Landrum, 57, and her grandson, Colby Landrum, who was just 7 years old.
And they're driving home after dinner, right, on this pretty isolated road near Dayton, Texas, dense woods all around.
Exactly, just heading home.
So at first, they see this light above the trees.
And their first thought, totally reasonable, is it's probably just an airplane. Houston Intercontinental Airport isn't that far away, maybe 35 miles.
Makes sense. You'd see planes around there.
Absolutely. But then, a little bit later, they see the light again.
And this time, it's different.
Oh, yeah. Much closer. Much, much brighter. And that's when they realize, this isn't an airplane.
This is where it gets properly weird.
Definitely.
Yeah.
They describe this huge diamond-shaped object just hovering there, treetop level.
Wow, and flames. You mentioned flames.
Yeah, periodically flames were apparently blasting out of the bottom, and they could feel this intense heat coming off it.
So intense that Vickie Landrum, she got scared.
Understandably. She urged Betty Cash to stop the car, worried they'd get burned. It's interesting, though, her reaction.
Oh.
Well, Vickie was apparently quite religious, and she interpreted this thing, this terrifying object, as maybe a sign linked to the second coming.
Really? She told Colby it was Jesus.
Yeah, told him it wouldn't hurt them. It just shows how we try to fit the unknown into what we already believe,
Right. But Betty Cash reacted differently, more anxiety.
Yeah, she felt anxious, thought about turning around, but the road was too narrow. Shoulders were soft from rain. She was worried about getting stuck.
So they were kind of trapped there, watching this thing.
Pretty much. They even got out of the car for a bit. Curiosity, maybe, or just disbelief.
But Colby was scared, so Vickie went back to him.
Right. Betty stayed outside a bit longer. And the description they gave later is, it's quite specific.
What did they say it looked like?
Dull metallic silver, like a big upright diamond, but with the top and bottom cut off flat.
Size-wise.
Huge. They compared it to the Dayton Water Tower. Imagine seeing that just floating there.
That's massive. Hard to even picture. And it had lights.
Yeah. Small blue lights, apparently running the center.
And those flames from the bottom.
Like a cone.
Sort of flaring outwards, yeah. Like a big cone of fire bursting out now and then.
And the movement was weird too, wasn't it? It went down when the flames stopped?
Exactly. When the fire died down, it would sort of drift downwards a few feet closer to the road. Then, when the flames blasted out again, it would rise back up. That doesn't sound like any normal aircraft propulsion.
Not at all. And the heat. They really stressed the heat. Said the car metal got painful to touch.
And Betty used her coat on the door handle.
Yeah, just to open the door to get back in. And Vickie, she claimed her hand actually pressed into the dashboard vinyl because it got so soft from the heat.
Leaving an imprint. That's quite specific.
Yeah, apparently it was visible for weeks. It was even shown in an HBO documentary later on. It's one of those details that makes you pause.
Okay, so the object eventually moves off. But the weirdness isn't over yet.
Not by a long shot. Because then came the helicopters.
Right. A lot of them.
They counted 23. 23 helicopters that seemed to approach the area after the diamond object descended, and they kind of surrounded where it had been in a tight formation.
And Betty Cash thought she recognized the type. Chinooks.
Yeah, she identified some as Boeing CH-47 Chinooks, those big tandem rotor military helicopters. And she claimed they had United States Air Force markings on them.
If that's true, that points towards, something official.
It certainly implies it, yeah. The whole thing, from first seeing the light to the object and helicopters leaving, they figured it lasted about 20 minutes.
20 minutes. That's a long time to witness something like that. But there's some fuzziness about the exact spot this happened, isn't there?
There is, yeah. John Schuessler's book gives location, FM 14852-100, south of Inland Road. But Robert Schieffer, writing for Skeptical Inquirer, pointed out that, well, none of the witnesses, or even Schuessler, seemed totally sure about the precise location later on.
That does add a layer of uncertainty.
It does. But what's less uncertain, and really central to this whole story, are the health problems they started having almost immediately.
Right after the encounter, that same night.
Yeah. After Betty drove the Landrums home, all three of them started feeling sick. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea.
Like a bad flu, but worse.
Yeah, plus generalized weakness, burning eyes, and this feeling like they had a really bad sunburn. Which is weird, obviously, for a December night.
But Betty Cash got the worst of it, didn't she? It got really bad for her.
It really did. Her condition went downhill fast. Developed these large, painful blisters, couldn't walk, started losing patches of skin, clumps of hair.
Oh, wow. And she ended up in the hospital.
Yeah. January 3rd, 1981, so less than 2 weeks after the incident. Hospitalized for 12 days initially.
And then had to go back.
Yes, readmitted later for another 15 days. And the reports say the doctors, they initially thought burns, but then started suspecting radiation exposure, radiation sickness.
That's serious. And she later developed cancer.
Sadly, yes. She was treated for cancer later on.
And the Landrums, Vickie and Colby.
They had similar symptoms, weakness, skin sores, some hair loss, but less severe than Betty. Vickie developed a cataract in one eye a few months later, April 81. And Betty's first breast cancer diagnosis was in 1983.
And they were convinced these health issues were directly caused by that encounter.
They absolutely maintain that. But of course, this is where the skepticism comes in strong.
Okay, so what are the counterarguments?
Well, Brett Sparks pointed out that the symptoms, while nasty, didn't quite fit the profile for a massive dose of ionizing radiation. He felt something like that should have been fatal much quicker.
So he suggested chemicals?
Yeah, maybe some kind of chemical contamination. An aerosol, perhaps? He thought that might better explain the rapid onset.
Interesting. And Gary Posner, he was pretty critical of the whole thing.
Very skeptical. He questioned a lot of the details, especially around Betty's medical condition. Pointed out discrepancies between, say, later accounts and the actual early medical notes.
Like the hair loss.
Exactly. The initial hospital notes apparently said little, if any, hair loss, though it clearly developed later. And a dermatology consultant diagnosed cellulitis, a skin infection, not widespread skin loss initially.
So potentially some inconsistencies in how the symptoms were reported or remembered over time.
It raises that possibility, yes. And then Brian Dunning offered other potential explanations for the health issues.
Like what?
For Betty's hair loss, he suggested it might have been alopecia areata, which is an autoimmune thing, and maybe her other symptoms came from an illness she already had.
And for Vickie?
The only documented thing around that time was the cataract. Dunning basically suggests they might have wrongly linked their health problems to the UFO.
And maybe unintentionally exaggerated things, especially if they were seeking compensation.
He raises that possibility, that maybe the story grew over time, possibly influenced by the desire for answers or compensation, especially if they suspected government involvement.
It's complex. Okay, let's talk about other inconsistencies. The shape of the object itself, that wasn't always described as a diamond, was it?
Well, later on, like during that interview at Bergstrom Air Force Base about 8 months later, both Betty and Vickie drew a diamond shape. Vickie even added flames.
Earlier.
Much earlier, only about 34 days after the incident, Betty apparently said she couldn't really make out the shape because the light was too bright. Vickie also said she couldn't tell. It was only young Colby who said it looked like a diamond back then.
That is a significant difference in recollection.
It is. Memory, especially under stress, can be tricky. Retelling stories can also subtly change them.
Right. And what about that story Vickie told about meeting a helicopter pilot?
Ah, yes. The CH-47 pilot she supposedly met in April 81, who allegedly mentioned checking on a troubled UFO near Huffman.
That sounds like pretty strong corroboration, if true.
If true. But further digging showed it was likely a case of mistaken identity or confused timelines. The incident that pilot was involved in actually happened way back in July 1977.
Oh. So completely unrelated to their experience.
It seems so. That link didn't pan out.
Okay, but there were other witnesses who saw helicopters that night, right? A police officer.
Yes. Patrolman Lamar Walker from Dayton PD and his wife Marie. They did report seeing about a dozen Chinook-type helicopters in the same general area on the same night.
Okay, so that matches the witness's account of helicopters.
It matches the helicopters, yes. But crucially, the walkers did not report seeing any diamond-shaped UFO or any other strange lights, apart from bright lights shining down from some of the choppers themselves.
So they saw helicopters, maybe on maneuvers, but no UFO.
That's what their report suggests. Consistent with military activity, perhaps, but not corroborating the core UFO sighting.
Okay. So after all this, the witnesses clearly believed something extraordinary happened, and they suffered for it. Did they take any action?
They did. They contacted their senators, got advised to file a claim with the judge advocate at Bergstrom Air Force Base. They went through interviews there in August '81.
And eventually sued the government.
Yes, they hired a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against the U.S. federal government for $20 million in damages.
20 million. They must have been utterly convinced the government was responsible.
Absolutely. The case went on for years. Testimony from NASA, Air Force, Army, Navy officials.
But the government denied everything.
Completely. Said they didn't have any such UFO, didn't operate those helicopters in that incident. And in the end, August 1986, the judge dismissed the case, ruled in favor of the government.
Wow. That must have been devastating for them.
A huge blow, surely. But their story didn't just disappear. It got a lot of media attention.
On shows like, That's Incredible.
Yeah. Vickie went on there, even did hypnosis on air. Both she and Betty were on UFO Cover-Up Live later, talking about it all.
And Unsolved Mysteries, sightings.
Yeah.
It became a classic case.
It really did. Even Colby revisited it years later on UFO Hunters. The story had legs.
It captured the public imagination, but sadly, Betty and Vickie aren't with us anymore.
No. Betty Cash died December 29th, 1998, exactly 18 years to the day after the encounter.
Wow, that's poignant.
Isn't it? And Vickie Landrum passed away on September 12, 2007.
So, besides the lawsuit, were there other investigations, like from UFO groups or scientists?
Oh, yes. Vickie reached out to NASA initially, who pointed her towards John Schuessler. He was a NASA engineer, but had a big personal interest in UFOs.
Ah, the MUFON connection.
Right. Schuessler and MUFON investigated independently. He wrote a lot about the case. Alan Hendry from COFO also took a look early on.
And those helicopters were always a key point, suggesting government involvement.
Definitely. For the witnesses, the object followed by military helicopters seemed like an obvious connection. But like we said, investigations couldn't prove it.
Not even the Army's own investigation.
No. Lieutenant Colonel George Thoran did the only really thorough official government probe in '82. His conclusion: no evidence the helicopters belonged to the U.S. military in that context.
But he thought the witnesses were credible.
He did. He said he found Cash and Landrum credible and the walkers, too. Didn't think they were making it up, just couldn't find military link.
So if not a secret government craft, what else? What did the skeptics propose?
A few different ideas. Stuart Campbell suggested it might have been a mirage of the star Canopus, which would have been bright and in the right part of the sky.
A mirage of a star causing all that.
It seems. Maybe unlikely to explain the heat and shape, but it's a natural explanation put forward.
And Philip Klass, the big skeptic.
Klass focused on the lack of physical evidence. No radioactivity found in the car by Schuessler. No medical records from before the incident to compare against.
Right. The lack of radiation is often brought up.
It is. The Texas Department of Health couldn't find any residual radiation at the site either. Now, proponents argue certain radiation types wouldn't leave traces, or that gamma rays wouldn't make things radioactive.
But it still weakens the physical evidence side of things.
Significantly. It makes it much harder to prove radiation exposure was the cause of the health issues.
And Peter Brooksmith, he questioned their health beforehand, too.
Yeah, basically asking, what was their health like before December '80? He called the case baffling, frustrating. Starts strong with witnesses, but ends in dead ends and denials.
Sounds like it. A real puzzle.
And as Texas Monthly summed it up, to this day, there is no conclusive explanation of the night's events. It just hangs there, unresolved.
So wrapping this up, we've got this really compelling story from 3 eyewitnesses. A bizarre object, intense physical effects, severe health problems afterwards.
Really consistent testimony over years, too.
Right. But on the other side, well, a total lack of hard physical evidence. Official investigations finding nothing concrete. And plausible, though maybe not fully convincing, skeptical explanations.
It really highlights the whole problem with investigating these kinds of claims.
Sure.
You have powerful personal stories versus the need for solid proof.
So considering everything the witnesses sticking to their story, the lack of a clear answer after all this time, what do you listening make of it all? Was this a real encounter with something truly unknown? Maybe extraterrestrial?
Or perhaps a misidentification. Something terrestrial, but still very strange. A secret test gone wrong, despite the denials.
Or could it be that belief, maybe fear, and just the human need to find an explanation for something terrifying and inexplicable shaped how this story has been told and retold?
Those are the questions that keep this case alive, I think. It's fascinating, frustrating, and a real testament to how weird things can get and how hard they can be to pin down.
That is the end of this episode. Until next time, keep to the shadows. Some legends are best left undiscovered.